Shabbat Shalom. Today we are reading from Parsha Bamidbar. Bamidbar means in the wilderness, a name which clearly describes where we were and in many ways our state of being during those 40 years. We were in the middle of nowhere. We were surrounded by sand and rocks, a little vegetation, very little, some ibex and other desert wildlife, and not much else. The common English name given to this book is Numbers. This is a title that's taken from the Greek Septuagint translation of the Tanakh into Koine Greek between the 3rd and 1st centuries BCE. Numbers actually tells us nothing about the book or the environment or the backstory in which it is written, but it does encourage this question: why do nations count their populations? The first thorough survey taken in this country was in 1086. William the Conqueror wanted to know what he had achieved, so he ordered the Domesday Book to be written. And this book is a detailed inventory of land and property. It was a massive undertaking in those days, and it took years to complete. It included England and some of Wales, but of course not Scotland or Ireland, both as yet unconquered. And it provides a detailed picture of life in Norman England. It notes the number of villeins, those who were tied to the land, that is, serfs, and cotters, farm laborers or tenants who occupied a cottage in return for labor. And it details the numbers of these in each manor. Unlike a modern census taken most recently last year, it did not provide an accurate count of the number of people living in England. Instead, its purpose was to establish the ownership of assets so that owners could be taxed. In 1279, King Edward I commissioned a similar survey which details rural society. It lists the number of villeins and cotters, even their names in this case, also their obligations, the size of their holdings, if any, but of course for tax purposes. In the 17th and 18th centuries, the times of the Tudors and the Stuarts, the bishops were made responsible for the counting of the number of families in their diocese, because everyone was under the bishop's authority. But why did God require a census? In this week's Torah reading, the details are set forth of one of several censuses taken of the Bnei Israel in the years following our Exodus. Our sages have said the count was because Hashem loves us. They say precious things, like blessings, are counted and recounted. But couldn't census taking also expose us to danger? Let's look for a moment at that idea. The census taken by Melech David, of course, we know was not in accordance with God's purpose. Now, a census, the purpose of taking one, has two contrasting aims. The first is that it asks the individual to suspend his individuality for the purpose of the count. But at the same time, by arriving at a number comprised of the sum of its parts, all must ask if they are worthy of being part of the total. Every B'nai Yisrael is loved by God, as children are loved by parents. Our level of observance does not enhance or detract from his love for us, although it certainly makes a difference in our relationship with him. But God's love, at least on this level, is reflected in a census that allows every Jew to contribute equally to the total number, regardless of his or her level of faith or observance. On the other hand, lack of personal faith exposes the whole nation. Does God scrutinize the behavior of the individual in judging the future of the nation? Now let's look at King David. He commissioned a census of the whole nation of Israel. Did God instruct him to number Israel and then punish them for it? You can read about this in Shmuel Bet 24 or Divrei Hayamim Aleph 21. What we know from these passages is that Hasatan tempted David. And David didn't resist because he was overwhelmed by pride in his own accomplishments. It's so easy when we are prosperous, when we do well, when we succeed, to believe that we have accomplished this on our own. And sadly, in that moment in time, David succumbed to this. When David was challenged about taking a census by the military commander, Yoav, who was also his uncle, David did not say God told him to take the census, but that Yoav should just follow orders. And it says the king's word prevailed. There were two legitimate reasons for taking a census in those days. One was, of course, to assess the population for the purpose of taxation. The other was to conscript an army. But God had blessed David with abundance, and he had given Israel peace from its enemies. So it would seem that a census at such a time demonstrated a lack of faith on David's part, as well as pride. He was looking for physical evidence of national strength instead of depending upon God. God's action against Israel caused David to realize that he had sinned greatly and that Israel had sinned as well. And now the purpose of the wilderness census We read in Bamidbar 1:3 that the stated purpose of the wilderness census concerned defense preparations. And so, women and males under the age of 20 were not included. This was unrelated to their social status. It was due to their military ineligibility. The count included men from every tribe except that of Levi. And we note that the tribe of Yehuda ranked as the largest with 74,600 men, including, of course, only those men over the age of 20. And this, of course, indicated Yehuda's prominence in our early history. The Leviim were not counted in the census because they were set apart by God to serve him as Kohanim. Another suggested reason for the census is that it was intended to emphasize the power of God. A year had passed since the Exodus, and we needed to be reminded of God's faithfulness, his ongoing faithfulness to us. We're told that, 70 people, the main members of the family of Yaakov, went down to Egypt. But God led an entire nation through the wilderness, keeping his covenant with Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. However, the clearly stated purpose of the census was to assess numbers for military eligibility. Preparation. Our vulnerability could have been a concern only if we were lacking in faith and thus open to judgment by God. The scriptures tell us that when we have been faithful to God, we are safe from any negative consequence of a census or other activities. In fact, each one of us will stand before God and be evaluated on the basis of our personal faithfulness to him. The scriptures compare the people of Israel to the stars of the heavens. In fact, this is one of God's promises to Abraham. Hashem accounts for each star by number and by name. Look at Yeshayahu 40, verse 26. In the same way, each one who belongs to his people is precious, and he counts us by number and by name. But our sages remind us we're not only compared to stars, we're also compared to sand. In case we become overwhelmed with our own importance, we're reminded of our status as that which is walked on by feet. Either way, God made this promise to Abraham. Interestingly, I studied astronomy at university. I found it fascinating. I can't tell you that I know a great deal about it, but I found it a fascinating subject. And looking at the stars still is amazing. The Hubble Space Telescope, which was launched by NASA in 1990, is a space-based telescope that has expanded our understanding of the massive universe in which we live. And I have to tell you that my study of astronomy predates the Hubble Space Telescope. The stars were the same, but we couldn't necessarily see them as clearly. This telescope is suspended 380 miles above the Earth's surface, and it sends video images that allow us to glimpse areas we could only imagine before. The area of space studied seems empty and desolate from Earth. But when this telescope, the HST, is focused, its sensitive eyes see 10,000 galaxies, some with more stars than we can imagine, and as far away as 13 billion light years. Incomprehensible. The closest star to Earth, except for the Sun, is approximately 24 trillion miles away, and many stars are billions of times further away. We measure such distances in light years, something truly incomprehensible. Light travels at 186,000 miles per second. Therefore, a light second is a distance which is actually 186,000 miles. A light year is a distance of almost 6 trillion miles. Traveling at the speed of light, it would take 6 years to reach the closest star in the sky. The section of the universe that houses the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon is known as the galaxy of the Milky Way, as I'm sure you know, and it may include between 100 and 200 million stars. The HST can view 10,000 galaxies. But how many galaxies exist? It has been estimated from the tiny view we have that there are at least 100 billion galaxies. So that's 100 billion galaxies, each with at least 100 billion stars. And our scientists tell us if this all just happened. Did Hashem create the universe with such vast immensity in order to leave us in awe of his wondrous creation? More significantly, all of this declares the greatness of our Creator. It's nearly impossible to comprehend the vastness of the physical universe in which we live. And yet, Hashem has compared us, the nation of Israel, to the stars in the heavens. The stars are identified and recognized only by the light they give off. A star with no light is just a black hole. God created the nation of Israel to be a light to the Goyim, shining forth his glory on its own would be impossible. But we shine forth his glory through study of Torah and mitzvot, by reading and doing his word. Every individual star is a shining luminescence. Yes, you are a star. But one star would barely be noticed in the vastness of our universe. It is through the combination of the light from billions of stars that this beautiful canopy of points of light appears to us as the Milky Way or other constellations. But as I've said, we're also compared to the grains of sand in the sea. One grain of sand is invisible and individually valueless. Yet when many grains are used to fashion a great castle or a beautiful sculpture, each grain of sand has its position. While each individual is significant to God, it is only when we are numbered together that our presence truly counts. While it's true that in comparison to the total number, the individual seems insignificant, yet each contribution is vital to the whole. Israel is also compared to a human body. This is a body with many parts, each part of which serves a crucial function, not duplicated by another. No single part makes up the entire body, yet without any one part, the body would be seriously handicapped or possibly cease to function. A healthy body is comprised of individual healthy parts, organs, limbs, bones, skin, eyes, ears, a brain, all working in harmony. It is said by our sages that the entire imponderable universe was created with one solitary letter, He, the lightest of the letters, and more often than not, silent. If this unimaginable creation is all the result of just one letter being spoken or being thought, who can fathom the value of each Jew who himself is a letter of the Torah? Who can imagine the greatness and the reward of those who dedicate their lives to the study of God's holy word? As long as every star shines and every grain of sand is in place, every part of the body is healthy, every letter is in place, there is no danger. But if the individual star dims, the individual part of the body weakens, a letter or a grain of sand is missing, this impacts the whole. This is why our sages were so concerned that a census should only be taken when we are in a state of faithfulness to Hashem. When each individual within Israel is obedient to Hashem and seeks the good of our people, then we bring blessing upon our nation and upon the world. When we fail individually to fulfill the will of God, then the census can only underscore this lack, impacting and bringing negativity on our entire nation. Consider the terminology employed by Torah regarding the census. Instead of directing Moshe to count the Bnei Israel, God told Moshe to raise the people of Israel. The Hebrew word for raise is sur, which has a dual connotation. It can mean to raise, but it can also mean to remove. Used in the Torah in a positive sense, as in raising oneself to a higher level, it is also used in a negative sense, as in Joseph's prediction to the baker. Pharaoh will raise, that is, remove your head from your shoulders. The Torah also uses the Hebrew word lifkod, which means to count. The literal translation of the word lifkod is to remember. When something is counted, it is remembered. The same word also means to be absent. When someone counts a group of people, every individual is asked to remove his individuality for the greater benefit of the whole group, raising the individual to the level of the whole. On the other hand, every individual is crucial in comprising the total. In this sense, the individual is very much remembered. Ultimately, our faithfulness to God makes each of us valued, remembered, counted, included. We are Hashem's stars. May God bless you as we will be celebrating Shavuot. I hope that you'll be joining us. May God give you a wonderful Shabbat as we look forward to the celebration of Shavuot beginning this evening. God bless and keep you.